10-year-old Emma had 30 minutes to reach the adoption meeting that could change her life forever. Then she heard the scream. A little boy lay bleeding on the pavement, debris from an exploded tire scattered around his motionless body. Every second she stayed meant losing her only chance at a family. Every second she left meant he might die. She dropped to her knees, hands shaking, and made a choice that would cost her everything she'd been praying for. But what Emma didn't know was that the roar of motorcycles racing toward her wasn't bringing more danger. It was bringing the kind of justice that only bikers deliver. And when those men discovered what this homeless girl had just sacrificed, they made a decision that would shatter her in the most beautiful way possible. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are watching from in the comments. Enjoy the story. The first light of dawn crept through the alley behind Pinewood Town's public library, and 10-year-old Emma Foster was already awake. She'd been awake for hours, actually, clutching a worn piece of paper with an address scribbled in her own careful handwriting. The Pinewood Adoption Center, 28 Maple Street, 10-hour appointment. Her hands trembled as she read it for the 100th time that night, terrified that if she fell asleep, she might somehow miss it. This was her chance, her first real chance in 4 years. Emma carefully folded the paper and tucked it into the front pocket of her torn backpack, the same backpack that held everything she owned in this world. A change of clothes that didn't fit quite right. A toothbrush she'd found still packaged behind a drugstore. 3 library books on human anatomy and emergency medicine that she'd checked out under a fake name because the librarians had stopped asking questions years ago. And bandages, always bandages, medical tape, antiseptic wipes, a small pair of scissors, the supplies of someone who'd taught herself to save lives because it was the only way she knew how to feel close to the mother she'd lost. Emma had been 5 years old when her mother died, 5 years old when the world stopped making sense. She'd been a nurse, her mom, and Emma remembered the way she'd come home smelling like hospital soap and how she'd sit with her at night, teaching her the names of bones and showing her how to wrap a pretend wound on her teddy bear. When she was gone, the orphanage had felt like a prison. The other kids were cruel in the way that children can be when they sense weakness. And the staff looked through her like she was invisible, like she didn't matter, like she was already forgotten. So at 6 years old, Emma ran. She ran with nothing but that backpack and a stubborn dream that refused to die no matter how many cold nights she spent curled up behind dumpsters or how many times her stomach cramped with hunger. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to help people the way her mother had helped people. And she taught herself everything she could from library computers and medical videos and textbooks she memorized page by page before the librarians kicked her out at closing time. Helping people made her feel close to her. It was the only thing that did. Now, 4 years later, Emma stood up in that alley and brushed the dirt off her jeans, trying to make herself look presentable. The adoption meeting was in 3 hours. 3 hours to get across town, clean herself up in a gas station bathroom, rehearse her answers one more time. She'd practiced every question they might ask. Why do you want to be adopted? Because I want to belong somewhere. What are your dreams for the future? I want to be a doctor and help people who can't help themselves. What can you offer a family? I'll work hard. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. Emma slung her backpack over her shoulders and started walking toward the bus stop, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She checked the time on the church clock tower 2 blocks away. 7:43 in the morning, plenty of time. She'd be early. She'd smile. She'd shake their hands firmly like adults did. She'd show them she was worth taking a chance on. If you've ever felt invisible and just wanted someone to see you, this story is for you. Stay with me. Emma's about to teach us something about courage that'll change how you see the world. The morning air was cold and Emma pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body as she walked past the familiar streets of Pinewood Town. She knew every corner of this place, every alley where she'd slept, every shop owner who'd chased her away, every person who'd looked right through her like she wasn't even there. But today was different. Today someone was going to see her. Today someone was going to choose her. She whispered the interview answers under her breath as she walked, her voice barely audible over the sound of her worn sneakers on the pavement. She didn't know it yet, but Emma's most important lesson was about to arrive in the worst possible way. and the choice she was about to make would seal both their fates forever. Emma was 3 blocks from the bus stop when she heard the children laughing. It was the kind of sound that used to make her ache with loneliness. The sound of kids who had homes and families and didn't have to worry about where they'd sleep that night. They were playing near a row of parked cars on Elmwood Street, maybe 6 or 7 of them, tossing a ball back and forth in the early morning sunshine. Emma barely glanced their way. She was too focused on the time, on getting to that adoption meeting, on not letting this chance slip through her fingers like everything else in her life had. Then the world exploded. The sound was deafening, a violent bang that seemed to tear the air itself apart. One of the parked cars had a tire that gave way under pressure, and when it blew, it didn't just pop, it detonated like a bomb. Metal fragments and rubber shrapnel flew in every direction, a deadly spray of debris that sent the children scattering and screaming. Emma hit the ground on instinct, her arms covering her head, her heart hammering in her chest as the echo of the explosion rang in her ears. For a moment, there was only chaos. Parents running from nearby houses, car alarms wailing, the acrid smell of burnt rubber thick in the air. And then Emma heard a sound that cut through everything else. A woman's scream, raw and desperate, and full of the kind of terror that only comes when a child is hurt. She looked up and saw him. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, crumpled on the pavement near the curb. He wasn't moving. There was blood, dark and spreading, pooling beneath his head where a piece of metal debris had sliced across his scalp. The other children were crying, frozen in place, and the adults were still too far away, still running toward the scene, but not there yet. Not close enough to help. Emma's eyes went to the church clock tower. 8:17. She had less than 2 hours to get across town, clean up, and make it to the adoption center. Less than 2 hours before her one chance at a family disappeared forever. Her feet wanted to run toward the bus stop. Every survival instinct she'd developed over 4 years on the streets screamed at her to keep moving, to not get involved, to protect the fragile hope she'd been nurturing all morning. But then her mother's voice filled her head clear as if she were standing right beside her. Save who you can, Emma. Always. It was what she'd told her when she was small. When she'd asked her why she worked such long hours at the hospital, why she came home exhausted and sometimes crying. Save who you can always. Emma dropped her backpack and ran. She ran toward the little boy while everyone else was still trying to understand what had happened. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands already moving with a purpose that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old homeless girl. She checked his pulse first, fast but steady, thank God, and then gently turned his head to assess the wound. It was deep, a gash that ran from his temple to the crown of his head. And the blood was coming fast, too fast. Her hands were shaking. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unzip the front pocket of her backpack where she kept her medical supplies. But she forced them to steady, forced herself to focus the way she taught herself to focus when she practiced on mannequins at the library or imagined scenarios late at night when she couldn't sleep. She pulled out gauze, antiseptic wipes, medical tape. The neighbors were gathering now, standing in a horrified circle, but no one was moving to help. They were frozen, shocked, useless. Emma wasn't. She cleaned the wound as gently as she could, her fingers working with a precision that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. She applied pressure with the gauze, holding it firm against his scalp to slow the bleeding. Counting the seconds in her head the way her mother had taught her. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. She checked his breathing, shallow but regular. She tilted his head carefully to the side to keep his airway clear in case he started to vomit. She was operating on pure instinct now, on years of self-taught knowledge that she'd absorbed because it made her feel like her mother was still guiding her hands. Every second that passed was another second late to her meeting. Every second she stayed was another piece of her future slipping away. But the little boy's pulse was still beating beneath her fingers, and his chest was still rising and falling. And Emma knew with absolute certainty that if she left now, he might not survive. If you believe kids like Emma deserve protection and love, hit subscribe right now because what happens next proves that heroes still exist. Comment, save who you can if this girl's courage moves you. The woman who'd screamed, the boy's mother, Emma assumed, finally reached them, dropping to her knees on the other side of her son, her face white with terror. She looked at Emma with wild, desperate eyes, and she spoke to her in a voice that was calmer than she felt. "Keep talking to him. Tell him he's going to be okay. Don't let him fall asleep yet." The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face, and Emma kept pressure on the wound, kept monitoring the little boy's breathing, kept doing everything she knew how to do while the minutes ticked away, and her chance at a family died with every passing second. What Emma didn't know was that Tommy's father was already racing toward them. And he wasn't alone. The rumble of motorcycles was growing louder. The sound of motorcycle engines cut through the morning air like thunder, growing louder with every second until it felt like the whole street was vibrating with their approach. Emma didn't look up. She couldn't. She was counting compressions, monitoring the little boy's breathing, trying to remember everything she'd ever learned about head trauma, while her own heart threatened to hammer right out of her chest. The blood had slowed but not stopped, and she knew he needed real medical help, the kind only a hospital could provide. Then the motorcycles arrived. Michael Bennett came off his bike before it had fully stopped, his boots hitting the pavement hard as he sprinted toward the crowd gathered around his son. He was a big man, the kind whose presence commanded attention even in silence, and the leather vest he wore bore the patch of the Iron Ravens Motorcycle Club across his back. His face was twisted with a terror that only a parent could know. The kind of fear that makes the whole world narrow down to a single point, the child you die to protect. He pushed through the circle of neighbors and dropped to his knees beside Tommy, and that's when he saw her. A skinny girl, maybe 10 years old, with dirt on her face and clothes that had seen better days months ago. The girl's hands were covered in blood, Tommy's blood, but they were steady, competent, moving with a calm precision that seemed impossible given her age. Her eyes met Michael's for just a second, and in that second, Michael saw something that stopped his heart. The kid wasn't panicking. She wasn't crying or freezing or falling apart. She was saving his son's life. The paramedics arrived moments later, their sirens wailing as they pulled up to the scene, and they took over with practiced efficiency, assessing Tommy's condition, while Emma stepped back to give them room. One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, looked at the bandaging work, looked at Emma, and then looked back at Michael with something like awe in her expression. Whoever did this first aid knew what they were doing. This pressure dressing probably saved his life. The head wound could have been catastrophic if he'd lost much more blood. "You got here fast?" Michael's voice was rough when he answered. "I didn't do it. She did." He pointed to Emma, who was standing a few feet away now, her whole body trembling as the adrenaline began to drain out of her. The paramedics stared at the girl, disbelief written across her face, but there wasn't time for questions. They were loading Tommy onto a stretcher, preparing to transport him to Pinewood General. And Michael turned to find the kid, who just performed a miracle on his son. But Emma was already running. She grabbed her backpack and was sprinting down Elmwood Street, tears streaming down her face, her hand fumbling for her phone to check the time, even though she already knew it was too late. 8:47, the adoption meeting was at 10:01 Armas. She'd never make it. She'd spent too long with the little boy, and now her only chance at a family was gone, evaporated like morning dew under a merciless sun. She ran anyway, her lungs burning, her vision blurred with tears because maybe, just maybe, if she explained what happened, they'd understand. They'd give her another chance. They had to. Michael watched the girl disappear around the corner, watched her vanish into the maze of streets and alleys like she'd never been there at all, and something in his chest cracked wide open. He didn't even know the kid's name, didn't know where she came from or why a child that young knew how to perform emergency first aid like a trained professional. All he knew was that his Tommy was alive because of her, and the girl had run away like she was afraid of something worse than death itself. At the hospital, while doctors stitched Tommy's wound and assured Michael that he'd make a full recovery, his son's first words when he woke up were a question that would haunt him. "Where's the girl who saved me? I want to thank her." Michael had no answer. He had no name, no address, nothing but the memory of blood-stained hands and eyes too old for a child's face. He pulled out his phone and called his Iron Ravens brothers, his voice carrying the kind of command that came from years of leading men who'd follow him into hell if he asked. Find her. I don't care how long it takes. Find that kid. We owe her everything. The bikers fanned out across Pinewood Town, asking questions, following leads. What they discovered about Emma's life would break every single one of them. The Iron Ravens moved through Pinewood Town like a force of nature, their motorcycles rumbling down every street, their questions direct and unwavering. Michael had given them a description. Skinny girl, about 10 years old, torn backpack, clothes that didn't fit right, hands that knew how to save a life. It wasn't much to go on, but these men had spent years looking out for each other, protecting their own, and now they were looking for a child who'd saved one of their sons. They wouldn't stop until they found her. The first real lead came from the public library. An older woman with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck recognized the description immediately, her face softening with a mixture of sadness and familiarity. Oh, that's Emma. She comes in almost every day, stays until we close, always reading medical textbooks, anatomy books, anything about emergency medicine. She paused, her voice dropping. She sleeps outside, behind the building. We've tried to help, but she runs if we push too hard. Sweet girl, too smart for her own good. Breaks my heart every time I see her. The next piece came from a convenience store owner 2 blocks away, a man who'd watched Emma from a distance for years. That kid. Yeah, I know her. Been on the street since she was tiny. Word is she ran away from the county orphanage when she was 6 or 7. Used to try to steal food, but she stopped after I caught her once and just gave her a sandwich. Now she doesn't take anything unless she can pay for it, even if it means going hungry. Proud little thing. Won't accept charity. With every answer, Michael's chest tightened. With every new detail, the picture became clearer and more devastating. This wasn't just some kid who happened to know first aid. This was a child who'd been surviving alone for years, teaching herself medicine from library books because she had nothing else and no one to help her. And that child had been on her way to something important this morning, something that had made her run away even after saving Tommy's life. Then one of the Iron Ravens made a connection that stopped Michael cold. One of the neighbors near the accident had mentioned overhearing Emma mention something about an appointment, about being late, about ruining her only chance. Michael pulled out his phone and started calling every adoption agency, every social service office, every place that might have had a meeting scheduled with a 10-year-old girl that morning. On the 3rd call, he found it. The Pinewood Adoption Center. A counselor confirmed that yes, they'd had a tenant appointment with a child named Emma Foster. A referral from the county system, but she'd never shown up. Michael's hands were shaking when he ended the call. The address burned in his mind. 428 Maple Street. The kid had sacrificed her adoption meeting, her shot at a family, to save Tommy. She'd given up everything to stop and help a stranger's child, and now she was out there somewhere, thinking she'd blown her only chance. The Iron Ravens found her 20 minutes later, sitting on the curb outside the Pinewood Adoption Center. Her shoulders were slumped forward like the weight of the world had finally crushed her flat. Her backpack sat beside her, medical supplies still visible through the open zipper. She wasn't crying anymore. She was beyond tears now, beyond hope, staring at nothing with empty eyes that had seen too much disappointment for someone so young. As the motorcycles approached, Emma didn't even look up. She was whispering something, the same words over and over in a voice so quiet, it was almost lost in the morning breeze. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry. I tried. I'm sorry. Michael cut his engine and dismounted, his boots heavy on the pavement as he walked toward the girl. The rest of the Iron Ravens formed a loose circle, their presence protective rather than threatening. But Emma didn't seem to register them at all. She just kept whispering her apologies to a mother who couldn't hear them anymore, to a future that had slipped through her fingers while she'd been too busy saving someone else's child to save herself. Emma thought the bikers were just passing through. She had no idea they'd been searching for her for hours or what they were about to say. Michael Bennett moved slowly, deliberately, like he was approaching a wounded animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. He crossed the sidewalk and stood in front of Emma for a long moment, just looking at this child who'd saved his son's life. This girl who was still whispering apologies to a ghost. Then Michael did something that surprised even his own crew. He knelt down on the concrete, bringing himself to eye level with Emma, and he waited until those hollow eyes finally lifted to meet his. Michael's voice was gentle in a way that seemed impossible for a man his size. "You saved my Tommy. If you hadn't stopped this morning, if you hadn't known what to do, he wouldn't be here. The doctors told me that. They said another few minutes of bleeding like that, and we might have lost him. You gave me my son back." Emma's lips trembled and she tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words came out broken and desperate. "I'm sorry I ran. I had to get to my meeting. I had an appointment at 10, and I was late, and I know I messed up. But there was so much blood, and he wasn't moving, and I couldn't just leave him there." Her voice cracked. "I understand if you're angry. I understand if you think I should have called someone else. I couldn't let him die." Michael's own voice broke then, roughened by emotion he didn't bother to hide. "Angry kid, you gave up everything for my son. You missed your adoption meeting. You sacrificed your chance at a family because you stopped to save a little boy you didn't even know. And now you're sitting here apologizing." He shook his head and tears were building in his eyes now. Tears he didn't try to wipe away. "Let us help you the way you helped him. Let me give you what you deserve." That's when Emma broke. The story poured out of her in a flood of words she'd been holding back for years. She told Michael about her mother, about how she died when she was 5, about the orphanage where the other kids hurt her and the adults ignored her. She told him about running away at 6 because she couldn't take it anymore, about living on the streets, about sleeping behind the library and learning medicine from textbooks because helping people made her feel like her mother was still alive somehow. She told him about the dream that kept her going through cold nights and empty days, the dream of becoming a doctor, of saving lives the way her mom had saved lives. And she told him about this morning, about the adoption meeting that was supposed to change everything, about the choice she'd made when she heard Tommy scream. Every Iron Raven standing in that circle was crying now. These hardened men who'd seen violence and loss, and every kind of darkness the world could throw at them. And they were crying for a 10-year-old girl who'd survived more than any child should have to survive, who'd taught herself to heal because no one had been there to heal her. If you can't stand seeing good people punished for doing the right thing, stay with me because justice is about to roll in on 2 wheels. Drop a comment saying, "Heroes deserve families," if you're standing with Emma. The door to the adoption center opened, and a woman in professional clothing stepped out, her expression shifting from confusion to concern as she took in the scene before her. A child surrounded by motorcycle club members, all of them emotional, the girl herself looking like she'd been through a war. She started to speak, started to ask if there was a problem, but Michael stood and turned to face her, his hand resting protectively on Emma's shoulder. "Ma'am, I'm Michael Bennett. My son Tommy was in an accident this morning. He nearly died. And this girl right here, this incredible kid, she saved his life. She stopped on her way to her adoption appointment with you, and she saved my son. She gave up her chance at a family so my family could stay whole." The counselor's face softened as understanding dawned, and she looked at Emma with new eyes, seeing not just another case file, but a child of extraordinary courage and heart. She knelt down beside Michael, her voice gentle when she spoke. "Emma, is that true? You were coming to meet me this morning?" Emma nodded, unable to speak, and the counselor reached out to touch her hand. "Oh, sweetheart, you didn't ruin anything. You proved exactly what kind of person you are." She looked up at Michael, at the circle of bikers with tears streaming down their weathered faces, and she smiled through her own tears. "I think Emma just found her family." But making it official wouldn't be easy, and what happened next would prove just how far the Iron Ravens were willing to go for one brave little girl. The paperwork started immediately. Michael Bennett sat in the adoption center office the very next morning, filling out forms with a determination that bordered on fierce background checks, financial reviews, home inspection schedules, character references. He provided everything they asked for and more. The social workers warned him that the process could take months, that there were procedures and protocols, that nothing in the system moved quickly. Michael looked them dead in the eye and told them he didn't care how long it took. Emma was coming home, period. While the lawyers and social workers processed endless paperwork, the Iron Ravens mobilized like a military operation, preparing for the most important mission of their lives. Michael's house became ground zero, and within hours of Emma being placed in temporary foster care, motorcycles lined the street as the Brotherhood descended with tools, paint cans, lumber, and a shared purpose that needed no explanation. These men who'd spent years riding together, watching each other's backs through good times and bad, now channeled all that loyalty into building a sanctuary for one 10-year-old girl who'd proven that heroism had nothing to do with size or age. They cleaned that house top to bottom, scrubbing years of bachelor living away until every surface gleamed. They transformed the spare bedroom into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine, painting the walls a soft lavender that Tommy insisted Emma would love, building sturdy bookshelves along one entire wall because Michael had told them about the girl's obsession with medical texts. The Iron Ravens pooled their money and filled those shelves with brand new books: anatomy, emergency medicine, physiology, even advanced texts that would challenge a college student, let alone a child. If Emma wanted to be a doctor, they'd give her the tools to become the best damn doctor who ever lived. Tommy appointed himself interior decorator, picking out sheets covered in stars, pillows that looked comfortable enough to sleep on for the first time without nightmares, a lamp for the bedside table so Emma could read as late as she wanted. He told everyone who'd listen that he was preparing a room for his sister, and the way he said it with absolute certainty, with pride, made grown men tear up all over again. If you believe communities should rally around kids like Emma, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories of people choosing love over fear. Comment, "This is family," if this brotherhood moves you. Emma's first night in that house felt like stepping into a dream, and she was terrified it would end the moment she closed her eyes. Michael led her to the bedroom, opened the door, and stepped back to let the girl enter first. Emma stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the books, at the bed with its clean sheets, at the desk positioned near the window where morning light would pour in. She reached out with trembling fingers to touch the spine of a medical textbook, half expecting it to disappear like smoke, unable to comprehend that this was real, that this was for her. Dinner that first night was quiet, almost sacred. Michael made spaghetti, nothing fancy, but Emma sat at that table with Tommy chattering beside her, and Michael serving plates like this was the most normal thing in the world. And something inside the girl's chest cracked open. She ate slowly, carefully, afraid that eating too much or too fast would reveal how desperately hungry she'd been for so long. Not just for food, but for this, for belonging, for the sound of family, for someone caring whether she had enough on her plate. That night, the nightmare came. Emma woke up gasping, disoriented, reaching for her backpack that wasn't there because she was used to sleeping in alleys where everything you owned could disappear if you didn't keep it close. She was halfway to the door, ready to run, when Michael appeared in the doorway. The big man didn't say anything at first, just sat down on the edge of the bed and waited until Emma's breathing slowed, until the panic receded enough for words to make sense. "You're safe now, sweetheart," Michael whispered into the darkness. "You're home, and I'm not going anywhere." While lawyers processed paperwork, something bigger was happening. The Iron Ravens weren't just building a bedroom. They were building proof that Emma deserved this, and they had one more surprise waiting. The first 3 weeks were harder than Michael had expected, though he never let Emma see his concern. The girl was healing, yes, but healing wasn't the same as being healed. Emma flinched at every loud noise. A door slamming, a motorcycle engine starting, even Michael's laughter when it came too suddenly. She hoarded food in her backpack, sneaking pieces of bread and fruit from the kitchen and hiding them under her bed like she expected the abundance to vanish overnight. And every morning at 4 Michael would hear the creak of floorboards and find Emma standing by the front door, backpack on, ready to run before anyone could tell her to leave. Michael's patience never wavered. Every morning he'd gently guide Emma back to her room, remind her that this was home, that nobody was asking her to go anywhere. Every time he discovered the hidden food, he'd simply leave it there, understanding that trust couldn't be rushed, that 4 years of survival instinct wouldn't disappear in a few weeks of safety. He was building something with this girl, something that required the same patience he'd learned working on motorcycles. You couldn't force the pieces to fit. You had to let them find their way together. Then the Iron Ravens told him about the plan they'd been working on in secret, and Michael knew it was time. They called it a community meeting, told Emma it was just a chance for everyone to thank her properly for what she'd done for Tommy. Emma didn't want to go, uncomfortable with attention, but Tommy begged and Michael insisted it would mean a lot to the crew. So the girl reluctantly agreed. When they walked into the Iron Ravens clubhouse that Saturday afternoon, Emma expected to see the familiar faces of the bikers who'd become her unlikely protectors. Instead, she walked into a room full of strangers in professional clothing, doctors in white coats, nurses in scrubs, a woman in a business suit who introduced herself as the administrator of Pinewood General Hospital, and in the corner, local news cameras with their red recording lights glowing like watchful eyes. Emma froze, her instinct to run flooding back, but Michael's steady hand on her shoulder kept her anchored. The hospital administrator stepped forward, her smile warm but her eyes serious. "Emma, we heard what you did. We heard how you saved Tommy Bennett's life with nothing but supplies from your backpack and knowledge you taught yourself from library books. We heard about your dream to become a doctor, about the years you spent studying alone because you had no other way. And we want to invest in that dream." The room fell silent as she continued, her words carrying the weight of a promise that would change everything. "We're offering you a full scholarship. Private school starting this fall, then college, then medical school. Everything covered. We're assigning you mentors, experienced doctors who will guide your education, summer internships at the hospital starting next year. Everything you need to become the physician you were meant to be." Emma stood there, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing, certain she'd misunderstood, certain this was some kind of mistake. The administrator knelt down in front of her, her voice gentle. "Now there's only one condition, sweetheart. You have to promise us that you'll use this gift to help people who can't help themselves. The way you helped Tommy, the way your mother would have wanted you to help. Can you promise us that?" That's when Emma broke. The tears came in a flood she couldn't control, her whole body shaking with the weight of emotions she'd been holding back for years. She tried to speak, tried to say yes or thank you or anything at all, but no words would come. Michael pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while the girl sobbed against his chest, and the entire room erupted in applause that felt like validation, like proof that the world could still be good, that kindness could still be rewarded, that one brave choice could ripple out into a future beyond imagining. The scholarship guaranteed Emma's future, but the biggest moment was still waiting in adoption court. The courtroom felt sacred that morning, sunlight streaming through tall windows and falling across wooden benches that had witnessed countless families being made and unmade by the strike of a gavel. But today, there was no question about the outcome. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human story, held Emma's file in her hands and read it aloud in a voice that carried the weight of something momentous. She told the story of a 10-year-old girl who'd survived homelessness, who'd taught herself medicine from library books, who'd been on her way to an adoption meeting when she heard a child scream. She described how Emma had stopped, how she'd sacrificed her only chance at a family to save a stranger's son, how her quick thinking and self-taught skills had prevented a tragedy. She spoke about the Iron Ravens who'd searched for her, about Michael Bennett, who'd knelt on a sidewalk and promised to give this girl what she deserved, about the scholarship that would carry Emma all the way through medical school. The courtroom was packed. Michael sat at the front table, his hand resting on Emma's shoulder, steady and sure. Tommy was beside them, his small hand gripping Emma's, refusing to let go. And behind them, filling every available seat and lining the walls where standing was permitted, were the Iron Ravens. These men in their leather vests, with their weathered faces and strong hands, had shown up in full force because one of their own was gaining a daughter, and that made Emma family to all of them. The judge finished reading, closed the file, and looked directly at Emma with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Young lady, in all my years on this bench, I have never seen a child more deserving of a loving home, and I have never seen a family more committed to providing one." She lifted her gavel, and the courtroom held its breath. "It is my honor and privilege to grant this adoption. Emma Foster, from this moment forward, you are Emma Bennett." Welcome to your forever family. The gavel came down, that sharp crack of wood on wood that made everything official and real and permanent. And Tommy launched himself into Emma's arms with a squeal of pure joy. My sister, my real sister. He was crying and laughing at the same time. And Emma held him tight, her own tears flowing freely now, no longer afraid to show emotion because this was real. This was happening. This was forever. Michael pulled both children into his arms, his face wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. The Iron Ravens stood as one, their applause thundering through the courtroom like a physical force, and the judge smiled through her own tears, because moments like these were why she'd spent 30 years in family court, why she believed, despite everything, that love could still triumph. Outside the courthouse, the celebration exploded into life. Motorcycles roared to life in perfect synchronization, their engines singing a song of victory and belonging. The Iron Ravens surrounded the Bennett family because that's what they were now, officially and irrevocably, the Bennetts. And the sound of their joy echoed through downtown Pinewood until it felt like the whole town was celebrating. If you believe talent and kindness should be rewarded, comment "Invest in Heroes" right now and subscribe if you want more proof that good people still change lives. We're just getting to the best part. The weeks and months that followed were a blur of firsts for Emma. Her first day of private school, walking through those doors in clean clothes that actually fit, carrying a backpack filled with new notebooks instead of medical supplies and stolen food. Her first tutoring session with teachers who treated her questions like they mattered, who challenged her brilliant mind instead of overlooking it. Her first day shadowing doctors at Pinewood General, wearing scrubs that had been sized specially for her, watching surgeries and asking questions that made seasoned physicians take notice. There was the afternoon Tommy convinced her to ride on the back of Michael's motorcycle, and Emma discovered the freedom of wind in her face and her arms wrapped around her father, as they rode through mountain roads where the air smelled like pine and possibility. There were dinners around the table where laughter came easily, where Emma slowly stopped hoarding food because abundance had become reliable. And there were nights, blessed, peaceful nights, where Emma slept straight through until morning without nightmares, without waking at 4:01 a.m., ready to run, because she finally believed that home was a place she deserved to stay. That name, Emma Bennett, was about to mean something bigger than any of them realized, because Emma never forgot where she came from. The local news story went viral within 48 hours. What started as a feel-good piece about a homeless girl saving a biker's son and finding a family became something much larger, something that touched a nerve across the entire country. News outlets picked it up, then national networks, then social media platforms where Emma's story was shared millions of times by people who needed to believe that kindness still mattered, that sacrifice could still be rewarded, that the world wasn't as broken as it sometimes seemed. But the most unexpected consequence came in the messages that started flooding the Iron Ravens clubhouse. Emails and phone calls from social workers, teachers, librarians, all telling similar stories about other kids like Emma. Children living on the streets, sleeping in alleys, teaching themselves to survive because the system had failed them or they'd slipped through its cracks. Some were runaways from abusive homes. Others had aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. All of them were trying to build futures out of nothing, and all of them had been inspired by what happened to Emma Bennett. Michael called an emergency meeting of the Iron Ravens, and what they decided that night would become their most important mission. They would create a nonprofit organization dedicated to finding kids like Emma, kids with dreams and potential who just needed someone to believe in them. They'd provide housing, education, mentorship, everything necessary to turn homeless children into successful adults. And they'd name it after the lesson that had started everything, the words Emma's mother had taught her and that she'd lived by even when it cost her everything. Emma's code, save who you can. The paperwork was filed within a month. Fundraising began immediately and the response was overwhelming. People who had been moved by Emma's story opened their wallets and their hearts. Local businesses donated money and resources. The hospital expanded its scholarship program. Within 6 months, the nonprofit had purchased a residential facility that could house 20 children with plans to expand. They recruited counselors, teachers, and medical professionals willing to volunteer their time. And at the center of it all was Emma herself, insisting that she wanted to help, that she needed to give back what had been given to her. Every Saturday morning, Emma returned to the public library where she used to sleep behind the building. But now she walked through the front door with purpose. She'd set up first aid classes in the community room, teaching homeless kids the same skills that had saved Tommy's life and changed her own. She showed them how to check for a pulse, how to stop bleeding, how to keep someone's airway clear. But more than that, she showed them that someone cared, that they weren't invisible, that their lives had value beyond measure. Tommy was always beside her, her shadow and her partner, handing out supplies and offering encouragement, and making sure every kid who walked through that door knew they were welcome. The bond between brother and sister had become something powerful, something unbreakable, forged not just by legal papers, but by shared purpose. They were changing their community together, one child at a time, proving that family wasn't just about blood or adoption papers. It was about choosing to show up for each other every single day. Michael would watch them sometimes, standing in the back of that library room, and feel his chest tighten with a pride so fierce it hurt. He'd gone looking for a girl who'd saved his son's life, and he'd found a daughter. But more than that, he'd found a purpose that extended far beyond his own family. Saving Emma hadn't just saved one child. It had saved all of them, had given the Iron Ravens a mission that mattered more than anything they'd done before, had proven that brotherhood meant more than riding motorcycles and watching each other's backs. It meant building futures for kids who deserved them. 1 year after the accident, Emma and Tommy returned to the street corner where it all began. What happened there would prove Emma had finally made peace with her past. 1 year to the day after the explosion that changed everything, Emma and Tommy walked hand in hand down Elmwood Street carrying a bouquet of white lilies. The morning air was crisp and clean, the kind of autumn day where everything feels possible. And the street looked different now in ways that had nothing to do with the season. It looked smaller somehow, less threatening, like returning to a childhood home and discovering it wasn't nearly as large as memory had made it. They stopped at the exact spot where Tommy had fallen, where Emma had dropped to her knees with shaking hands, and made the choice that would define both their lives. Someone had planted a small garden there in the months since. A circle of flowers maintained by neighbors who remembered what had happened, who wanted to mark the place where a miracle had occurred. Emma knelt down carefully and placed the lilies among the other blooms, her fingers gentle as she arranged them just so. Tommy knelt beside her, his hand finding hers. And when he spoke, his voice carried the wisdom of someone far older than his 7 years. "You're the best big sister ever. You know that?" He looked at her with eyes full of love and understanding. "You gave up your family for me that day. You missed your adoption meeting because you stopped to save my life. And then you got an even better one. You got us." Emma felt the tears coming and didn't try to stop them this time. She'd learned over the past year that tears weren't weakness, that letting people see your emotions wasn't the same as letting them see you break. She pulled Tommy into a hug, holding him close, and whispered the words that had guided her through the darkest years of her life, the words her mother had given her like a compass that would never fail. Save who you can, always. Behind them, the rumble of motorcycle engines announced the arrival of the Iron Ravens. They'd given Emma and Tommy space for this private moment, but now they formed a circle around the two children, a wall of leather and steel and unconditional love. These men had become more than mentors or protectors over the past year. They'd become family in the truest sense. Uncles and brothers and father figures who showed up not because they had to, but because they chose to, every single day. Michael dismounted and walked over to his children, placing one strong hand on Emma's shoulder and the other on Tommy's. He didn't speak for a long moment, just stood there with them, looking at the flowers and remembering how close they'd come to losing everything. How one girl's courage had saved not just Tommy's life, but had rescued all of them from a future they couldn't bear to imagine. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Your mom would be so proud, sweetheart. The way you've taken everything that happened to you, all that pain and loss, and turned it into something beautiful. The way you're helping other kids now, teaching them what you learned, giving them hope." He paused, making sure Emma was looking at him, making sure the girl understood the depth of what he was about to say. I know I am. Every single day, I'm proud to be your father. Emma leaned into Michael's embrace, and Tommy wrapped his arms around both of them, and the Iron Ravens stood witness to this moment of perfect peace. This full circle returned to the place where everything had changed. The street corner that had once represented loss and sacrifice now represented something entirely different. It represented family, redemption, the kind of love that transforms tragedy into triumph. The wind picked up slightly, rustling through the flowers, and for just a moment, Emma could have sworn she felt her mother's presence there with them, felt her approval and her joy at seeing what her daughter had become. She'd kept her lesson alive. She'd saved who she could, and in doing so, she'd saved herself. But this was just the beginning. The girl who missed her adoption meeting was about to become the woman who changed thousands of lives. The years moved quickly after that anniversary, each one building on the foundation that Michael and the Iron Ravens had laid. Emma at 15 was unrecognizable from the homeless girl who'd slept behind libraries. She'd grown tall and graceful, her eyes bright with purpose as she dominated advanced placement chemistry and biology courses, her teachers writing recommendation letters that described her as the most driven student they'd ever encountered. At 18, standing in the kitchen of the home she never stopped being grateful for, Emma opened the envelope from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine with trembling hands while Michael and Tommy held their breath beside her. The acceptance letter felt like vindication, like proof that every choice she'd made, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been leading somewhere real. The Iron Ravens threw a celebration that shut down 3 city blocks, their motorcycles lined up like an honor guard, their pride in this young woman who'd started as a rescue mission and become their greatest achievement. Medical school tested Emma in ways she'd never imagined. The endless studying until dawn broke through library windows. The clinical rotations where she learned that saving lives in textbooks was different from saving them when real people were bleeding in front of you. The specialization in emergency pediatrics because she'd never forgotten what it felt like to be a child in crisis with no one to help. Before she left for Baltimore, Emma organized one final event in Pinewood Town. She stood in the public library's community room, the same room where she'd taught homeless kids first aid, where she'd transformed her pain into purpose, and she read a letter to the mother she'd lost so many years ago. "Mom, you taught me to save who I can. I saved Tommy and he saved me. Every life I touch from this day forward is a promise kept to you. I will honor your memory by living the way you taught me to live." Then came the moment that made everything complete. Dr. Emma Bennett at 26, wearing scrubs in the Pinewood General Emergency Room, responding to a trauma call. A child with severe head trauma, bleeding, unconscious, parents screaming in terror. Emma's hands moved with absolute certainty now. No trembling, no hesitation, just pure competence born from years of training and a lifetime of caring. She saved that child's life with the same precision she'd once used on Tommy. And when she looked at her reflection in the observation window afterward, she saw her mother's smile looking back at her. When that child's parents asked how they could repay her, Emma's answer revealed the woman she'd become and the movement she was building. Emma looked at those grateful parents with the same compassion she'd carried since childhood, and her answer was simple, profound, and completely genuine. Love someone who needs it. That's how you repay me. Find a child, a stranger, someone struggling, and show them they matter. That's the only payment I'll ever ask for. What had started as one biker crew saving one homeless girl had become something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. Emma's Code now operated in 15 states, a network of safe houses and educational programs that had housed and educated over 400 homeless youth. Dozens had already graduated and entered medical fields. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, all of them carrying forward the mission they'd learned from Emma herself. The Iron Ravens continued funding every program, their brotherhood expanding to include chapters across the country, each one committed to protecting and nurturing kids who'd been overlooked by everyone else. Tommy had grown into a force of nature in his own right. At 21, he was a licensed clinical social worker running Emma's Code youth programs with a specialization in foster care reform. He turned his own experience being saved by a homeless girl who became his sister into a career dedicated to fixing the broken systems that created kids like Emma in the first place. Michael had retired from active motorcycle club life, dedicating himself full-time to the nonprofit that bore his daughter's name. Every graduate received the same challenge Emma had been given years ago. Use your gifts to help people who can't help themselves and teach others to do the same. If you believe survivors should become rescuers, comment, break the cycle. Subscribe if you believe one person can change the system, because Emma's proving it every single day. And when Emma spoke at a national youth conference, her message reminded everyone why one choice can echo through generations. The convention center held 5,000 people, but when Dr. Emma Bennett walked onto that stage, the silence was absolute. In the front row sat Michael, his hair grayer now, but his pride unmistakable, and beside him Tommy, both of them watching the girl they'd saved become the woman who was saving thousands more. Emma stood at the microphone, looked out at an ocean of young faces, hungry for hope, and she spoke the truth that had shaped her entire life. I was 10 years old, homeless, invisible, hopeless. I had one chance to escape that life, one adoption meeting that could have changed everything, and I gave it up to save a little boy I'd never met. People told me I was stupid, that I'd blown my only opportunity, that stopping to help him was the biggest mistake I'd ever make. Her voice grew stronger, more certain. But that choice, that sacrifice, gave me everything. A father who loves me unconditionally, a brother who inspires me daily, a purpose that drives me forward, a legacy that will outlive me. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Your kindness might cost you something today. It might make you late, might make you uncomfortable, might require you to sacrifice something you think you need, but it will give you back everything tomorrow. Save who you can always. The audience rose as one. 5,000 people on their feet, tears streaming down faces, phones held high, capturing the moment that would be shared millions of times across every platform, spreading the message that one choice could change everything. Because sometimes the life you save when you stop for someone else is your own. Today, Dr. Emma Bennett serves as Chief of Pediatric Emergency Medicine at Pinewood General Hospital, the same hospital that once offered her a scholarship when she had nothing. She mentors over 30 medical students annually, teaching them that medicine is as much about compassion as it is about competence. She's married now with 2 children of her own, the eldest son named after the mother she never stopped honoring. And every Sunday morning, without fail, she rides motorcycles through mountain roads with Michael, their bond as strong as any blood connection could ever be. Tommy Bennett became a licensed clinical social worker and now directs all youth programs for Emma's Code, specializing in the foster care reform that his own story made personal. When asked about his sister, his answer never changes. Emma's not just my sister, she's my hero forever. Michael Bennett retired fully from the Iron Ravens to run Emma's Code full-time, and his impact has been staggering. He's personally helped place over 400 homeless youth in safe homes and education programs, giving each one the same chance he gave Emma. His words sum up everything. Saving Emma saved my whole family. The Iron Ravens themselves expanded into a national network of over 50 chapters, each one dedicated to protecting and educating at-risk kids. They've raised more than $10 million for the nonprofit, proving that brotherhood isn't just about loyalty, it's about action that changes lives. The legacy speaks for itself. 47 Emma's Code graduates now work in medicine. 89 serve in social services. Hundreds more fill college classrooms, all pursuing careers built around helping others, all carrying forward the lesson learned on a street corner 16 years ago. This story started with one homeless girl and one impossible choice. It changed hundreds of lives because Emma refused to walk past suffering. Emma missed her adoption meeting. She thought she'd lost everything, but she gained a father, a brother, a future, and a purpose. Because the best things in life don't come from playing it safe. They come from choosing love when it's hardest, from stopping when everyone else walks past, from sacrificing when you have the least to give. Emma's mother told her to save who she can. She saved Tommy, and in return, the Iron Ravens saved her. Now she's saving hundreds more. The cycle continues because one girl chose courage over convenience. If Emma's story moved you, I need you to do something right now. Hit subscribe if you believe kindness should be rewarded, not punished. Comment save who you can if you're going to carry this lesson forward into your own life. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that heroes still exist, and sometimes they're just kids with torn backpacks and bigger hearts than anyone expected. Because every view, like, and share tells YouTube that stories like Emma's matter, and they do. The Iron Ravens didn't walk past Emma's suffering. Don't walk past this story. Engage right now. And if you can't stand a world that punishes good kids for being kind, make noise in the comments. Let's prove together that kindness wins. Always. Thanks for watching. Now go save who you can.